In 1952, a CIA officer cleared an entire rebel stronghold without firing a single shot. No artillery, no airstrikes, no firefight. By sunrise, hundreds of armed guerrillas simply abandoned their positions and fled into the jungle. Years later, declassified reports revealed why. The CIA hadn't attacked their bodies, they attacked their beliefs. Because in the mountains of the Philippines, the most powerful weapon wasn't a rifle, it was a vampire.
1952, Luzon Island, Philippines. At first glance, the war didn't look like a war at all. There were no front lines, no tanks, no cities burning on the horizon. Only jungle. Thick, wet jungle that swallowed sound and light. American soldiers who had fought in Korea said Luzon was worse. You could walk 10 feet off the trail and disappear forever. Somewhere inside that green maze, the Hukbalahap rebels controlled entire provinces. They collected taxes. They ran their own courts. They decided who lived and who died. By day, the villages looked peaceful. By night, they belonged to the Huks. U.S. patrols kept getting ambushed. Supply trucks vanished. Informants were found hanging from trees as warnings. Conventional warfare wasn't working. Every time the army pushed into the hills, the rebels simply melted away into the jungle and returned the next week. Washington needed results. So instead of sending more troops, they sent one man, Lieutenant Colonel Edward Lansdale. He didn't look like a soldier. No medals, no battlefield scars. Before the war, he had worked in advertising. He sold soap and cigarettes. Now the CIA believed he could sell something else: fear. When Lansdale arrived in Manila, officers expected aggressive raids and mass arrests. Instead, he did something strange. He visited villages. He drank rice liquor with farmers. He sat with old women and listened to ghost stories. For weeks, he barely talked about the rebels at all. He kept asking the same question: what scares people here after dark? And the answers were always the same. Not the communists, not the army, something older, something that had lived in the islands for centuries. They called it the Aswang, and even grown men lowered their voices when they said the name. The Aswang wasn't just a myth. To the villagers, it was a fact of life. Parents warned their children about it the same way Americans warned theirs about wolves or kidnappers. Don't go out at night. Don't walk alone. If you hear something on the roof, don't look. Because the Aswang was said to hunt after midnight. It could move like a man or an animal. Some said it had wings. Others said it could stretch its tongue like a hollow tube and drain the blood from a sleeping victim without waking them. Livestock were sometimes found dead in the morning, white, bloodless. For generations, people blamed the Aswang. When Lansdale heard these stories, he didn't laugh. He took notes, careful notes. He filled entire notebooks with local superstitions, burial rituals, and taboos. To him, this wasn't folklore, it was intelligence. Later, one of his aides would remember him saying something unusual. If they already believe in monsters, Lansdale said quietly, why fight that belief? Why not use it? Instead of planning another military sweep, Lansdale formed a small psychological warfare unit. Not regular soldiers, hand-picked men who could move silently, speak local dialects, and disappear into the jungle without leaving tracks. Their mission wasn't to kill as many rebels as possible. It was simpler: make the rebels afraid to sleep, afraid to patrol, afraid of the dark itself. Because a tired, frightened fighter makes mistakes, and fear spreads faster than bullets. Within a week, strange rumors began circulating through Huk territory. Whispers. A farmer claimed he saw something watching his house from the trees. A child swore he heard wings at night. Someone said a body had been found near the river, drained of blood. No one could prove anything, but the story kept growing, exactly the way Lansdale wanted. By early spring, Lansdale had identified his first target, a Huk stronghold on a wooded ridge north of Manila. From that hill, the rebels controlled 3 villages and the only supply road in the valley. Every army patrol sent up there came back with casualties. Machine guns couldn't dislodge them. Mortars only warned them in advance. The Huks knew every tree, every ravine. It was their ground. So Lansdale proposed something unusual during the briefing. "No assault," he said. The room went quiet. Instead, he pointed to the jungle trail on the map, a narrow path the rebels used for night patrols. "We don't attack the camp," he explained calmly. "We attack their imagination." That night, a 4-man psychological operations team slipped into the jungle. No heavy gear, no radios, just knives, rope, and dark clothing. They moved the way hunters move, slow, patient, silent. Around midnight, they heard them. Boots on gravel, low voices, a Huk patrol heading downhill. The Americans stepped off the trail and waited in the brush, barely breathing. One by one, the rebels passed. 5 men, 6, 7. The last man lagged behind, adjusting the strap of his rifle. Too far from the others, too alone. The snatch took less than 3 seconds. A hand over the mouth, a blade, then silence. The patrol kept walking. They never noticed they were 1 man short. According to later accounts, what happened next wasn't written in any official report, but multiple former operatives described the same procedure. The body was carried deeper into the trees. 2 small puncture wounds were made in the neck. Nothing dramatic, nothing theatrical, just enough to resemble something the locals already feared. Then the corpse was suspended upside down from a branch and left there overnight. By dawn, the blood had drained. When the team finished, the scene looked unnatural, not like an execution, not like a firefight. Something else, something older. They placed the body back on the trail and disappeared into the jungle before sunrise. The patrol found the body just after sunrise. At first, they thought he had simply fallen behind, maybe twisted an ankle, maybe gotten lost. They called his name twice, no answer. Then one of the men froze. There was something on the trail ahead, a shape, lying on its back. When they got closer, the jungle went quiet. No birds, no insects, just wind in the leaves. Their comrade stared up at the sky with open eyes. His skin looked wrong, pale, almost gray, as if all the color had been washed out overnight. There was no blood on the ground, no footprints, no signs of a struggle, only 2 small marks on his neck. One of the rebels whispered the word first, Aswang. No one argued, because everyone had heard the stories. Bodies found empty, drained, taken by something that hunted after dark. The patrol leader tried to sound rational. "Animal," he said, "maybe bats." But even he didn't sound convinced. They wrapped the body in a poncho and carried it back to camp. By the time they reached the hilltop, the story had already changed. Now there were 3 bodies, then 5. Then someone swore they had heard wings during the night. Fear spreads fast in the jungle, faster than facts. By noon, nobody wanted night duty. By afternoon, 2 men had quietly deserted. By evening, the commander sent a runner to request relocation. He didn't report an enemy attack. He reported something worse. Unexplained deaths, possible supernatural threat. That night, fires burned brighter than usual on the ridge. No one slept, and for the first time in months, the Huks weren't watching the Americans. They were watching the trees, exactly as Lansdale intended. By the second night,
The hill no longer felt like a military position. It felt like a place people were waiting to die. The Huk commander ordered double sentries, 2 men per post, no one allowed to patrol alone. Fires were kept burning until dawn. The men cleaned their rifles again and again, more out of nerves than necessity. But discipline only works against enemies you understand. This wasn't gunfire, this wasn't artillery. This was something they couldn't see and couldn't explain. Just before midnight, a dog in one of the nearby villages started howling, then another, then silence. One of the younger fighters swore he saw movement between the trees. Another claimed he heard wings. The commander snapped at them to shut up, but he noticed it too. The jungle had gone dead quiet. No insects, no frogs, nothing. Around 2 a.m., one sentry abandoned his post and ran back to the fire. He refused to go back out, said something had been standing behind him, watching. By morning, 3 more men asked to leave, not permanently, just for a few days. They never came back. At dawn, another body was found downhill, not attacked, not mutilated, just a man who had tried to desert during the night and collapsed from exhaustion. But the story that spread through camp was different. They said the Aswang had chased him. Fear doesn't need evidence. It writes its own reports. By noon, the commander made a decision that would have been unthinkable a week earlier. Abandon the ridge, leave the heavy supplies, move to lower ground, get away from the trees. Within 2 hours, the stronghold was empty. Cooking fires still warm, ammo crates unopened, foxholes deserted. When the first Philippine Army scouts cautiously approached the hill later that afternoon, they couldn't believe it. No resistance, no ambush, nothing, just silence. Lansdale received the message in Manila at 6:40 p.m. One line, objective secured, no contact. He reportedly leaned back in his chair and said quietly, "Fear is cheaper than bullets." For the first time in months, the road through the valley was open. No gunfire, no ambushes, just trucks rolling through untouched jungle. The Philippine Army called it a tactical victory. Washington called it proof that the rebellion was weakening. But inside the small CIA office in Manila, Lansdale called it something else, a demonstration. He gathered his officers around a wooden table and laid out a new plan. If one rumor could clear a hill, what could a miracle do to an entire province? The next operation required no knives, no patrols, no bodies, just sound. The agency acquired a small C-47 transport plane, nothing unusual, the same aircraft used for cargo runs. But inside, technicians installed something strange, a powerful loudspeaker system normally used for psychological warfare broadcasts, the kind meant to talk to thousands of people at once. Only Lansdale didn't want speeches. He wanted something personal. They collected names, dozens of them, known Huk fighters, couriers, lieutenants, information from village informants, captured notes, old reports. Then they hired a local radio actor with a deep theatrical voice, slow, calm, authoritative, not a soldier, not an American, something closer to a priest or a god. The first flight launched just after midnight, cloud cover, no moon, perfect. The plane circled high above Huk territory, engines barely audible. Then the speaker turned on. At first, nothing but wind, static, silence. Then the voice, low, echoing. "This is the eye of God." The words rolled across the jungle like thunder. "I see you." A pause, then a name. "Ramon, son of Miguel, you cannot hide."
Down below, men froze in their foxholes. No radio, no explanation, just the sky calling them out one by one. Down in the jungle, men stopped breathing. Some looked up, some crossed themselves, others simply froze where they stood. The voice didn't sound mechanical. It didn't sound like a radio. It echoed, like it was coming from everywhere at once, from the trees, from the clouds, from inside their own heads. "This is the eye of God." The sentence rolled slowly, deliberately, not shouted, not angry, calm, certain. "I see your sins." A long pause, then another name. "Tomas, you left your post yesterday." A third. "Ernesto, you stole food from your brothers." The names were precise, personal, specific, details no outsider should know. Men who had survived firefights without flinching suddenly felt exposed. Because bullets you can fight, but God sees everything. One fighter dropped his rifle and whispered prayers. Another started digging through his pack for a rosary. By the third pass of the plane, nobody was watching the perimeter anymore. They were staring at the sky, waiting to hear their name. A Huck lieutenant later told an interrogator something strange. He said it didn't feel like propaganda. Propaganda tries to convince you. This felt like judgment, like the sky had opened and was reading a list. By dawn, 5 men had disappeared, not dead, gone, deserted during the night. One surrendered at a nearby church, telling the priest, "God spoke to me, he knows what I did." The priest had no idea what the man was talking about, but he kept hearing the same story, again and again and again. Within a week, entire units refused to camp outdoors after dark. They hid inside villages, inside chapels, anywhere with a roof, anywhere that felt protected. Meanwhile, Lansdale simply marked another note in his file. Audio pressure effective. No artillery, no firefight, just a voice, and grown men running from the sky. But Lansdale wasn't satisfied. Fear could scatter man, but he wanted something stronger: distrust. If soldiers stop trusting each other, the army collapses on its own. The next operation targeted the rebels' lifeline: supplies. Ammo crates moved through the jungle every week, carried by couriers and sympathizers. Rice, medical kits, rifle cartridges, mortar shells. If those shipments failed, the rebellion stalled. If they became dangerous, the rebellion destroyed itself. CIA agents intercepted one convoy, posing as government troops. No firefight, no arrests. They simply swapped crates. Inside a small warehouse, technicians opened hundreds of cartridges. Carefully, methodically, the gunpowder was removed, replaced with a tiny charge of high explosive, enough to detonate the weapon itself, invisible from the outside. Then everything was sealed and repacked. Perfect, factory fresh. The crates were returned to the trail, delivered right back into Huck hands. The first explosion happened 3 days later. A rifle burst apart during a routine cleaning. Shrapnel took 2 fingers off. They blamed bad maintenance. Then a mortar crew fired a round. The tube split open like a banana peel. 2 men killed instantly. Then another rifle exploded. Then another. Within hours, the rumors started. Sabotage, traitors, cursed ammunition. Nobody knew, so they stopped sharing supplies, stopped trusting deliveries. Some fighters refused to load their weapons at all. Better unarmed than blown apart. Arguments turned into fistfights. Fistfights turned into accusations. Accusations turned into executions. Lansdale read the reports with clinical detachment. He didn't call it sabotage, he called it internal erosion, because once an army fears its own bullets, it's already defeated. Within a month, the rebellion began collapsing from the inside, not because of bullets, because of suspicion. Huck fighters who had trusted each other for years now slept with one eye open. Every malfunctioning rifle meant sabotage. Every failed delivery meant betrayal. Every whispered conversation meant conspiracy. One commander accused his own quartermaster of planting defective ammunition. The man swore he was innocent. They shot him anyway. Another unit executed 2 couriers after a mortar round misfired. No proof, just fear. Supply lines slowed to a crawl. Meetings grew shorter. Patrols stayed closer to camp. The jungle, once their ally, now felt hostile, watching, listening. Even veteran fighters started carrying religious charms, crosses, medals, pieces of scripture folded into their pockets. Men who once mocked superstition now refused to walk alone after sunset. They weren't thinking about the Philippine army anymore. They weren't planning attacks. They were arguing about ghosts, about curses, about who God might punish next. And every day they spent fighting shadows was a day they weren't fighting the government. In Manila, Lansdale updated his reports with the language of an accountant: morale degrading, desertion increasing, operational cohesion compromised. Cold words, clinical, as if he were tracking inventory, not human beings. One junior officer asked him if any of this crossed a moral line, if maybe they were going too far. Lansdale reportedly shrugged and said something that stuck with the men who heard it: if they're afraid to sleep, they're too tired to fight. By summer, entire Huck zones simply stopped communicating. No orders, no patrols, just silence. The rebellion wasn't defeated in battle. It was exhausted, confused, paranoid, rotting from the inside out, exactly as planned. By late 1952, only one pocket of resistance remained: a narrow valley surrounded by thick jungle and old burial grounds. The rebels used it as a final hideout. If they lost this position, the uprising was finished. Lansdale decided to use the legend one last time. Not bullets, not bombs, the Aswang. Local folklore said spirits wandered near cemeteries, especially fresh graves. So one moonless night, a small CIA team moved in quietly. No insignia, no lights, just shovels. They located several recently buried bodies, fighters killed in earlier skirmishes, men their comrades had known personally. The agents dug them up, worked fast, clinical, no ceremony, no respect. Then came the part few people ever admitted publicly: phosphorescent paint, the same luminous compound used on watch dials, glowing faint green in darkness. They painted the faces, eyes, teeth, hollow smiles, just enough to catch the light. Then the bodies were propped upright between trees along narrow jungle paths, like they were standing, watching, waiting. At 3 a.m., the first patrol came through. One of the men screamed, not shouted, screamed, because 20 feet ahead, his dead friend was standing in the dark, glowing, eyes shining, mouth open, no sound, just staring. The patrol broke instantly. Rifles dropped, men running blindly into the brush. By sunrise, the entire valley was empty. Weapons, food, medical supplies, all abandoned. Some rebels didn't even take their boots, they just ran. Later that day, government troops walked in unopposed. No gunfire, no last stand, nothing. Just the smell of turned earth and shallow, open graves. Operation complete. The Huck Rebellion didn't end with a surrender ceremony. There was no famous battle, no dramatic victory parade. It simply faded. Units dissolved, leaders disappeared, fighters went home. Some blamed hunger, some blamed government pressure, but many remembered something else. The voices in the sky, the cursed ammunition, the nights when the jungle felt alive, and the dead who didn't seem to stay buried. Years later, Edward Lansdale was praised in Washington as a genius, a pioneer of psychological operations, a man who proved wars could be won without massive bloodshed. His methods were studied, copied, exported. Vietnam, Latin America, other places no one likes to talk about. Official reports called it innovation, efficiency, cost-effective warfare. But there's another way to describe it. He didn't defeat the enemy's army. He invaded their minds, their faith, their sleep. He turned folklore into a weapon, religion into artillery, fear into strategy. And maybe that was the real lesson, because once you learn how to manufacture monsters, you don't need tanks anymore, just imagination. Today, most of these files sit quietly in declassified archives, stamped, numbered, forgotten. But in some rural parts of Luzon, old villagers still lock their doors early, still warn their children not to wander at night. Not because of communists, not because of soldiers, but because something might be out there, watching. And if you ask them what it is, they won't say CIA. They'll say one word: Aswang. This is Declassified, and sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones on your side.